All right, we're back, and it is COMP229 finally, fall 2016, and it's week 5, part 1 of our broadcast. Couple of announcements. Remember that 2 weeks from now, you'll have your midterm test during this period, right? So 2 weeks from now. Right now we're sitting at week 5. That's the week before we go away for a break. There's a 1-week break after that because we're doing 7 weeks on, 1 week off, 7 weeks on. Right, so that's the week of October 24th, I think, is the break, right? So it's the week before that is going to be our little test, which we're going to make you build something in class. There'll be a practical test with some multiple choice true false. So it'll be the whole class. So that's the 4 hours. We'll do that. And then it won't take up the whole class. You'll be able to leave early for those people who are able to finish early. You'll be working alone. So it won't be an exam that you can combine with anybody else, but you will have to build something and answer some questions. Questions will be very simple, stuff we've talked about, and I will do a review the week before. All right, so it won't be something I'll tell you what I'm going to be looking for. So what did I do today? I went around and I checked you guys, and I did kind of a check and X again, but it was more detailed. And I did that because, like I said, I wanted to push you guys to start. Some of you hadn't started. I know that. Some of you, you know, aren't going to get things done for Friday if I hadn't checked you today. And I told you I was doing it last week, so there shouldn't have been any surprises that I went around and did that. It's just, it counts as one of your labs. We're going to have 5 of them, right? So there's another 3 to go for your labs, which is worth a total of 10% of your final grade. There'll be other things we do in the lab, all right? Not just this stuff. And I'll probably reserve some of that stuff in class for part of next semester too, next half of the semester, I mean. So like second half. So that way we can do different things. So to give you a chance to practice some skills, like creating basic templates and stuff with MVC, which is a little harder to do than with things we're doing now with ASP.NET. I'm just gonna, while we're talking, I'm gonna launch my virtual machine to make sure we get going here. So I did that. That was one of the things I wanted to try and do with you guys. And I wanted to do it because, like I said, it's done like this. If you have, that's great. But some of you haven't seen that because, you know, you're used to just submitting your work and the professor coming around and saying, okay, it's here's your mark, right? But sometimes the problem is that we don't know what I'm looking for, right? That's part of the issue. And so what I wanted to go through, and hopefully this is what this didn't take up all the work. Word took up 3 gig. Let's take a look. Because last week I gave you, all right, well, let's put that up. Last week I gave you this project, right? And I asked you guys to start doing it. And some of you asked me, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? And that's what I wanted to clarify before your first submission, right? Because some of you haven't had me before, so you don't know what I'm looking for. Remember that by Friday, I'm looking for your initial project structure setup, which is just your file structure, your common headers, your first draft of your external document, which I talked to you all about, a link to your GitHub repo, and some kind of link to your live site, whether it's Azure or somewhere else. Remember, if you submit with Azure, just repeating that you're going to get 4 bonus marks. Okay, next week, what do I need? So this is part 2, worth another 5%. I'm not going to do another lab like this next week. This is just this week to get you guys going. Next week is going to be a work session the whole week, right? But what am I doing? And now remember, next week is also week 6, which means part of that work session is going to be a little bit of a review about what we're going to be talking about on the exam, which is the following week, right? Also, keep in mind that next week is a short week for you guys because there's also Thanksgiving Monday. There's no school on Monday, right? So that's going to be putting a little bit of pressure on you for next week to produce, because that means a lot of other things are happening in that week, most likely. I'm just guessing. And some of you are going to come say, Tom, can I have more time? And the answer is going to be no. Not because I don't want to give you time. I just got no time. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff to do. You were asking me today. You said, hey, is this enough time for us to do everything? Yeah, if you submit on time, it's enough time. But if you don't submit on time, or if I give you an extension, forget it. Yeah. One website. Okay, let's talk about this. So next week, you need 1 main game page. Now, remember, some people have asked me in the today, well, I want to do the game, and inside the game, when I click in there, I want to go to game details, and the game details is going to give me more information. That's great. I didn't ask for that. That's extra marks, extra work for you too. Again, if you can avoid doing that and have it all on 1 page, which is what I showed you before. So, which is, if I looked at the wireframes, 1 page that has all the detail, that's a little easier. Remember, think about the slots that are going to show your game as just containers for your data. So when you click that next button, you're not actually moving to another page. You're filling the data in those containers. That's what you're doing. Okay? So page isn't changing. It's the same game tracker page, just more information, right? That's what you're doing. If you try and click in there and get details, it's up to you, but that's going to be way more work for you because you have to create another page. You have to go back, right? All this navigation stuff that I'm not asking for. Keep it simple is the rule that I'm going to show you today. And I don't want you to do too much, because if you do that, then it's going to be out. Your scope is going to increase to the point where you won't be able to finish on time, right? Okay. Database structure setup. What does this mean? If you're only doing it local, right? Local database. That means that you may have to share something, even if your link is up on Azure. You're just demonstrating to me this week that you can do Azure. Great. I'm going to give you 4 points. But what if you can't do your database on Azure, right? If you do your database on Azure, you need to do it from home. Can't do it here, right? Because here, it'll block you inside the school. But what if you can't do it, right? And you just want to give me a setup that connects to the school server or something local, right? That's here in your computer. That's not 4-point bonus. That's just like you having a database. And then your main site on Azure is just going to be a placeholder. That's what's going to happen, because it can't connect to your local database on your machine. It's impossible, right? In order for you to have Azure working properly, in fact, both your database and your link has to be working on Azure, right? So after today, you get your 4-point bonus. But maybe next week you can't do it. It's okay, right? I'm not going to say, hey, you promised me Azure. I'm going to go after you for Azure. If you can't do Azure next week, and keep going, it's okay. Do it locally, and then I'll be able to see it. And I'll show you how to export your database from your local database, so I can import it into mine to test, because that's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to import your SQL, all your code. I'm going to show you how to export, and I'm going to import. That's how we're going to do it. Okay, method comments and stuff, more comments. Update external document. By next week, I want your color palettes and your typography, all the extra stuff that I missed from this week's external documentation. You need to do another update, because also, remember, you're going to start producing pages, and maybe you might include some initial screenshots. Not the final screenshots, because you may have to change those or modify things, but some idea of what you're doing. An updated repository, your GitHub repo is going to show, if I go to your GitHub repo, I should show it's updated with extra commits. And also inside your external document, you should have a more commit history, because you've changed stuff. Your project has progressed. So I want to see the progression in your document. That's what's due next week, Friday. So hey, one game on the main page. Some people say, well, one game, I might as well do all the games. Do all the games. I'm only looking for one game to work and connect to your database. That's what I'm looking for next week. If you can do that, right, that's satisfy my requirements. Yes. 1 out of 4. That means that you can have placeholders for the other ones, but have that one working. All right. That means you know how to connect to the database. Navigation is not a big issue, but I should be able to read from one table in the database next week. 0. You don't have to have anything in the other ones, right? If you want to, and if you're a planner, like let's say, for example, you're someone like Eddie. Expect Eddie, who's very diligent in the way he does his work, probably all of it's going to work next week, right? For the most part, other than security, because we haven't talked security. Maybe even being a go-getter, he might get security done too. That's okay. I'm not going to look for it, but if it's done, it's 1 week early. Fantastic. I'm going to be celebrating, right? I'm just saying, because I'm putting you up on a pedestal, Eddie, right? Because I think you're awesome, right? But let's say, for example, Waynell does it. He says, next week, instead of doing one page, okay, I won't use Eddie. I'll say Waynell. So he's going to be the one. He's going to be the golden boy, right? Or maybe Hina's going to be the golden girl next week. Her and her partner next week are going to have everything done, right? If you do, it's okay, is what I'm saying. I don't have to do the bare minimum that I've given you. You can do more. You can finish it next week if you want. I'm going to check you only for the stuff I'm looking for, though. Then the following week is when your due date is done, which is during exam week. So by Friday of the exam week is when the final project 1, is due, right? Not by next week. It's by the following week, by week 7, right? And as we approach exam week, there might be, I'm just going to put it out there, there might be a little bit of leeway in terms of final due dates, only because we're heading into reading week. So I might give you a couple extra days if you need it, okay? That's the only thing I can do from a flexibility perspective. Hit me up again. Talk to me again as we get to that last exam week, all right? And then maybe we'll see how things go. If people really need extra time, couple of days on the weekend. It's not going to kill anybody. All right. So that's really due week 2, this next week coming up. We'll talk about the site security and everything else starting next week. I'm going to be talking about site security, right? So that's why it can't be due now. It has to be due by by the final week, which was week 7, right? Okay. Any questions around this project? I know some people are worried. If you don't do anything, you should be worried, right? If you start going at it and you start producing pages, you'll be okay, right? Yes. Yes.
Would you mind posting like a
all the possible bonus marks? Eddie, then I give all the secrets of the universe away. I can't do that, right? The bonus marks are, I'll say it right now for the video. Bonus marks are, if you put it up on Azure, you get 4 points for this week, right? So just putting it up on Azure, 4 bonus marks, right? 100%, like I'm not gonna say 1 or 2 or 3, 4. You're gonna get 4 if you put it up on Azure, right? That means you've gone around the problems of getting it up on Azure, you figured all that stuff up and you put it up. So instead of giving you 4 marks, like here, instead of 4 marks, you're gonna get 8. So instead of getting out of 17, potentially you can get 21. That's what it's gonna be for this week. Okay, next week. If your database setup is 1 mark, right? But if you put it up on Azure, your database, and connect it to your link, to your site, and it works, and if I test it with you, right? 4 marks. So again, instead of 17, you can be out of 21. So lots of possibility there, right? And then for the final, any extra stuff you do, like any extra stuff you do, if you indicate things like, I got extra pages, I added additional information, if I see that if the UI is awesome, like really cool looking UI or whatever, some people I know in previous years, people have linked it, they've scraped pages for actual data, like real life data, like they've gone to a page like FIFA and they look at that page, get the data and put it into their page automatically. I mean, this is all extra stuff. I'm not going to tell you to do it, but if you want to add additional features, and we'll talk about it as we get closer about additional pages. For example, let's say site security and admin pages, but let's say you want to add in things like user management. You say, I want to add user management too. I want to be able to manage my users in my database. So I can add a user, delete a user, modify the user's profile, reset the user's password, all that kind of stuff. That's extra marks. I'm not telling you to do that, right? But if you want to do those extra functionality, if you have time, I'm just saying, go ahead, right? I suspect, though, that possibly everybody will not have time with all the things that are going on, right? But if you do, then I'll offer. And you should list that in your external document. So at the bottom of your external document, you should have a section that says bonus features, right? And you should list all the bonus things you did right down there, and then I'll give you marks appropriately. Typically, what I like to do is I like to give anywhere between 2 and 4 bonus marks based on a feature that you've added in, right? So let's say, for example, like I said, up on Azure, 4 points. Using a database, 4 points. But let's say you have other things, like your site really looks beautiful and you've done some really cool responsive design techniques, 4 points, right? I might give you 4 bonus points for making it look so nice. And did your all your wireframes for mobile, and it works perfectly on mobile devices. 4 points. I'm gonna give you 4 points for mobile. Just do that, right? There's lots of little opportunities for you to do these things. Just list them at the bottom of your site, all the things you do. Remember, everything you do isn't for me. You're doing it for you. This is an opportunity for you to practice and create a portfolio piece for yourself, right? Speaking of portfolio pieces, if you haven't had an assignment in, it should be closed by now, if I'm not wrong, right? I think it closed on Monday, right? So it was due Friday, right? Remember, Friday was due, closed on Monday. Well, if you have a problem with that, or if you haven't handed it in, please speak to me after class, because I'd be very concerned. It is worth, I believe, 10% of your final grade, right? That would be very bad if you didn't get it in, right? And it is also, remember, everything we do here in the assignments and projects prepare you for your midterm exam, right? So if you haven't done it, you're gonna have trouble on your midterm exam, because you need to be able to do this stuff and work with the tools in order for you to be fast enough to produce what I'm gonna ask you to do for your midterm. Okay, enough about administration. Let's get to this thing. So last week, we got to build this page, and I'm going to put up the last week's page. So you guys should be able to do all this week. Remember, we connected to a local database, and some people had challenges with this, right? The local database. Who had challenges? I know, Hina, you had challenges. Who had challenges with the local database, connecting to the local database and creating that piece? If you follow the video, you should all be fine, right? Sometimes, though, it's really funny how your SQL Express server works, okay? Sometimes you have some funny things that go on, right? Remember, if you're downloading my project, you will not have a database associated with it, even though I do in my web.config, because it's a local DB that you're connecting to. So an example of this would be if I open up last week's lesson, so lesson 4, right, from last week. Let's take a look. And I need to make a template for this, right, this week to connect to and see what happens, right? Okay. So I'm going to continue, and I'm going to put up a new repository here. Okay, let's see what this thing does. So I'll wait till this is first. First thing that I want to do, remember, is after I launch, I want to build my applications. If I download this from GitHub, I want to build, and then I want to run. Okay, so let's just wait for this to finish building. So building started, build succeeded. If I run it on Chrome, and if I run with debugging, it's going to show me what we had last week. Remember, what we did was we created a students page that read from my local database. And you guys should be able to read. This is the read operation. Remember, there's 4 different operations that we're going to be using when we connect to databases. Create, which we actually did. We created all of our data. We had sample data, so we haven't done that yet. Read, which we did last week. Update, and delete. We'll do a couple of those this week if I can. We'll try and do the delete, and we'll try and do the update. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Next week we're going to deal with more stuff again. It'll be a pure coding week and a little bit of review, right? So please expect to be here and work the whole time. Okay. All right, so we have this up. Now, what I need to do is I got to detail to you what happened. So let's go back and review. Remember last week what we did was in our Solution Explorer, we had a bunch of links about contact courses, departments, enrollments, and so on. We're going with this whole Contoso University example where we have different tables in our database. If I go to my SQL Server Object Explorer, right? I recommend also that SQL Server Object Explorer is the way that you're going to easily connect that are local and remote, okay? An example is I have this local database called MSSQL Local DB, right? This one here that comes with Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise, this one, right? Notice if I click on databases, it lists all the databases to different projects that I've had, right? The one we made last week was COMP229, this one, right? See this one here, COMP229? That's the one we made last week. And if I scroll down, you can see under tables, I have these following tables: DBO dot, and then that's the style, the system type, right? The database type, and then courses, departments, enrollments, and students. When you create your own database for your game tracker, what tables do you need for this? You're going to make some tables on the database. You can't just be, you know, somehow the data is persisting from nowhere. It's got to come from somewhere. It's got to be contained somewhere, and it's going to be contained in these tables, some kind of tables. So let's think about this next week for yourself. What's one of your submissions? You need games. That's probably going to be a table, right? You probably need weeks, right? Each week is going to feature different games, right? So how many weeks do we have in a year? 52, right? In reality, we wouldn't track it this way. But for this little example, I would recommend tracking each week. So week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But think of this now. If I have the week number, what am I tracking each week? The game, right? Each game itself, which means I might have 4 games. So I'm going to have game 1. Here's table for each week. Game 1, game 2, game 3, and game 4. That's all the stuff that's going to be in each week, right? And in each of those other fields you might have for game 1, you might have game 1 winner for game 1, team 1 or team 2, right? How many points were scored in week 1? All that data you can have in that week, right? So if I have week number 40 as an example, or whatever week this is today, and I think today is week 41 if I'm not wrong, or something like that. Let's take a look. So calendar week. I go look at calendar week, and maybe when, you know, okay, so what calendar week is it? What week is it? Week 40. We're at week 40 right now. Okay, so again, how do they count weeks? Right, you can see that the week is highlighted, right? They count it from the first part of the month, of the year, right? So this is week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and so on. You can see the week numbers right here, right? Someone asked me today, hey, what if I put in not just the weeks, but also the day. Day is not required. We don't care about the day. All I care about is the games of the week. Why? Day's too much detail. It's too much data, right? Yeah. I don't want each week. I only want 4 of these weeks. Out of 52 weeks, I need 4 weeks filled in a row. So maybe you're going to do, I'm just putting it out there, week 40, like this week, week 41, week 42, week 43, week 44. Done. That's all I need you. And then when you start your game, I want you to take me to that week, and then in your code, when you submit, say, Tom, I put in data for weeks 40 through 44. Okay, fine, I'll check those weeks. And then I'll put in some extra weeks myself. I'll try and put in some data when I log in and register and check out your code to see if it works. That's it. You only need 1 page, your game tracker page, a contact page, if you really want to add it in. It's not required. Unless it tells you in the document you need a contact page, don't put it in, right? For example, does it say in this document, right, that you need a contact page? What does it say? A game tracking page. That's it. I don't add a contact page in here. I didn't say, hey, I need a contact page. I need a terms of use. I need a privacy policy. These are all extra things. You want to add them in? Fantastic. I didn't ask for them, right? I don't need a home page. I just need a game tracking page. That's all I want, right? You want to add any extra stuff? Go ahead. I do need, though, a register page. I need that. So if you don't have a register page to register, we're going to have to build that, right? And I need some kind of login page. Chances are I need a login page and register page. Now, you may have included your login and some people include that in their title bar, username and password inside their nav bar. That's okay. That's another valid way of doing it, right? So you can avoid a login page, but registration page you definitely need, right? So when you do your wireframes, think about that. When you submit your final wireframes for this week coming up on Friday, make sure you remove stuff you're not going to. If you're not going to keep your promises to me, don't put it in your wireframes, right? Don't put in web, like your mobile wireframes if you can't produce them. Especially if you and your partner aren't the strongest when it comes to programming. All right, don't promise me extra stuff. It's not going to do any good for you. And in reality, it's just going to make your job more difficult. Same thing with additional details pages. You can take guys and girls. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to hold it against you if you take it out and you just have one main game page. I just want you to wireframe that today. That's it, right? Anything extra you put in, I'm going to hold you to it. Like a client, I would say, well, yeah, you told me you're going to do that. Fine, here it is. Oh, wait, and then when we have the final review of your project, I'm going to go, where's this, where's this, where's this, where's this? Doesn't exist. Marks lost for nothing, right? Please don't do that. Because in real life, if you promise the client you're going to do something, you got to deliver, right? Okay, so enough about this. Let's go back. So we talked about how I did this database stuff last week. We linked into we use the entity framework, right, which is just a wrapper for our database, and we use something called LINQ, which is a query language, a C# query language to connect with our database. That's what we did, okay? And if you looked at the code, we only did students. So if I can actually click on the student, here's my code for the student, right? Now look at what it does. Remember that I have. This is my student. This relates under the models folder. It relates to the student database, the student table, right? So actually, these tables here in the models folder were automatically created when I connected to Entity Framework and to the database. The links to the database, the connections to the database exist in your web config, like we talked about. The 2 files we talked about last week, which is web config and your global.asax file, right? Your web config file has the link, and if you look inside here, the connection string connects to your Contoso connection, right, which is your local DB and tells you the exact place. Now, if you're going to connect to Azure, this would not be the same. It can't be. This link would be different. This link would be a link to your database on Azure. That's what it would show. A totally different link, right? You'd have to figure that out for the extra bonus marks, right? Hint, hint, though, if that link exists in your SQL Server Object Explorer, for example, let's say I'm not linking to my local database, but I'm linking to an Azure database up here. I could right-click and do a properties, and on the right, guess what you get? The connection string right here. So let's say I had a real database on Azure. This is just an example of a couple databases I had last semester, right? They don't exist, by the way, anymore. But if you notice, I have the whole connection string right here. I could double-click this connection string, copy it, right, and then put it inside my web config. Please be careful, though, that it's not exactly the same, and it doesn't include passwords, which means you'd have to go in and modify or update, edit the link to your connection string by adding in the password to your database. Okay, so you could do that. You could, as long as it's inside your SQL Server Object Explorer, you could right-click and get your connection string data. And you can also get that from Azure. Right? If you go up on Azure, it'll give you the connection string that you need. If you actually search inside the database link, it'll give you all the connection strings, all the information you need to put into your web config file. Okay. Again, I'm not forcing you to do a database on Azure. Its local database is just fine. Okay. So we did that last week. We did the connection and we read from the database. And the way we read from the database is we used link. So if I was going to show you the student page, here's our page. ASPX. So our page is very simple. All it does is we created a table, right? Because here's my grid view, right? My grid view, right, is the table. So grid view in ASP converts to table, right, inside HTML. Let's see what that does. I'm going to kind of run this thing. Again, just a little bit of review before we move on. Then I'll start coding extra stuff. Let's take a look. Okay, so we got this table. Nice. What does it really look like? So if I right-click and do a view page source, right? Well, it does this, right? So here's my table, and it actually converted my grid view, right, into a table with a header row. Here's my header, right? As well as information, right? These are my rows. So here's my table. There's my row. Here it is, and each row has table data. That's the TD, right? And each of these pieces of table data is going to be conjured. It's going to be taken from the database, right? Even though it looks hard-coded here, it's not. It's dynamic. It means if I change something and I refresh, data's going to be changed. We're going to do that today. We're going to modify this table, add some new information, and we're going to show you how to do that. All right, so again, the thing to note is, even though we have ASP stuff that's in our tags are ASP.NET, the result is still pure HTML at the other end, right? So it converts. It's not exactly a one-to-one, though. Okay? All right, let's add in some additional feature sets. So far what we've got is we've got our page. But what I'd like to do, when I click on my page, I want to add a new student, right? I want to add a new student. So how do I do that? Well, I want to create above my grid view and inside my table, so in between these 2 points right here, and between row or line 8 and line 10. And again, I'm looking at our COMP229 F2016 lesson 4. And by the way, we're going to make a new one, right? So I'll show you the complexity about doing this. All right, let's do it now actually. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to make a new template. I'm going to kind of close the solution, right, for a second, and I'm going to reopen my solution just for a second. Solution, there it goes. I'm going to close all these little files up just so that we don't need them. And I'm going to make a new template and create a new GitHub link. All right, so I'm going to go File, right? I'm going to go Export Template, just so you guys see this again. So here's my template. And notice I'm basing it on this COMP229 F2016 Lesson 4. Click Next. And I'm going to make this new template, Lesson 4. I'm going to make Lesson 5 today, right? Click Next or Finish. It's going to make the template. That's it. Without changing anything, I'm just press Export Template, Next, 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 Finish, and I have this template. Okay, now I need to use this template. File, Close Solution, right? And here's what it actually tells me the position where it put it. You're going to see a zip file. I'm going to make a new project now. So I'm going to say File, New, File, New Project. There we go. And now under Visual C#, not under Web, but under Visual C#, you can actually scroll down and you'll see some templates. One of them is COMP229, right? Lesson 4. That's the one I just made. So I'm going to change this one. Instead of Lesson 41, I'm going to change to Lesson 5. I'm basing my new project from my old one. Guys and girls, you need to know this for the exam, because I'm going to give you a template on the exam, and you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to change it from whatever my exam is to my exam dash my student number, right? So please remember this. I'm going to give you a template. and it's going to be up on wherever it's going to be, and you're going to get it from there and modify it. Okay. Let's go okay with everything else the way it was checked. We checked GitHub, we checked the new folder, all that stuff. We're making a new lesson. Hey, I got a question for you smart people. Is it going to connect to my database? You say no. Anyone say yes? No, to my database, my local database. Is it going to connect to my local database? No, you say no. Why no? Okay, but is it going to connect? It has in my web.config, it has the configuration details for my database. Will it connect? Well, let's see. I don't know. Let's see what happens, right? I mean, I made a new folder. What was that? I like your thinking. Let's take a look, right? So here's COMP229 Fall 2016 Lesson 5. We haven't changed anything. All we did is make a new project from the old one, right? I'm showing you this because you may have to do this yourself, and I know some people run into some problems. Let's run it. First of all, I'm going to build. So I'm going to build my solution. Now notice that we just replaced my NuGet packages. Whenever you make a template from it, or open up a template and create a new project from a template, it has to replace your NuGet packages. Next, I'm going to run in Chrome. Now, if it runs the way it should, I should see my links, a welcome screen, and when I click on student, it should show me the data, right? Like it connects to my database. And I haven't done anything. So here's my links, welcome. Click on students, and let's see what happens. Yay! Why? Because my web config is exactly the same web config. It's going to point to the same place. So people who thought it wasn't going to connect, wrong. It will connect. But okay, I'm just putting it out there. The reason why I'm saying this is because right now, my web config only points to an actual absolute path of where it's going to look to, right? That means if I had a link up on Azure, and it was pointing to the link on Azure, and I made a template from that, it would also link to the proper place. It would work, right? So this is a great way of a workflow. An example, I have my submission for my first part of my project, project 1, right? Part 1. I could make another one, part 2, and part 3, and it's not going to affect part 1 or part 2. Why is this a good thing to do? If you mess up, you can always go back, right? If you don't mess up, you're going to go forward, right? There's nothing lost here. And I don't mind if you give me different GitHub links every time. So if you give me, next week you give me part 2, and the final week you give me final, I'm okay with that. It's just your progression that I want to look at. It's not a real life scenario, right? So don't worry about it. It's okay if you make a template from what you're doing this week and make another project for next week. It's okay, and it's probably better, okay? Okay, good. Let me put this up to GitHub so you guys can have this one too. And the only thing you have to do is replace the database, right? And we're going to talk about that next week, how to do that. But I've already given you, I haven't changed anything in the database, so you can always recreate it from the Contoso University file that I gave you last week, which is still up on eCentennial. Okay? I know, hey? I know. See you later, buddy. All right. That's a different question. Let me answer that after, okay? I want to just get through this, and then I'll tell you how to do that. First, let's put it up on GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Changes, No Changes. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Sync. And you notice that it says, hey, you've got nothing to link to because this doesn't have a repository connected to it. I need to click this, Get Started, right? And then notice that it tells me where. It's not my personal account. I want it to go to Centennial, right? And it's going to say COMP229 Fall 2016 Lesson 5. Click Publish. This is just going to take my new files, and bam, it's going to be up on GitHub. Done. You got your GitHub link. You've got your 2 marks out of 4 for doing nothing, right? Just putting it up on GitHub like a backup. Okay. Let's add some different information now. Let's add some more stuff. So I'm going to go to Solution Explorer. I'm going to go to my students. And like I said before, I got this little space that I added in here, which is where I'm going to put my new information. And I'm going to add in a couple things here. I want to add in a link, a list, so maybe an H1 tag that's basically going to say something like, you know, student list, right? I probably need that, right? So here's my student list, right? And underneath my H1, I want a button, right? And there's different ways of doing this, but let's make it a standard button, okay, like this. So an A tag, right? By the way, let's do it in the shortcut. So A tag, and inside the A tag, right? I want a class, hear me out here, of button dash success, right? This is Bootstrap, and then button dash or dash small. A small button that's green. That's what this is. A button, a green button, a small green button. That's what this is. This is all Bootstrap, right? Okay, good. And inside of that, I want an I tag. I tag would be your font awesome, right? I tag with a class of FA dash plus, so a plus sign. All right, that's what it's going to be. Okay, good. So I've got a button. Now I don't have an href, but we're going to put that in, and I also need some kind of data that I got to put in there. Let's tab and put it in there. Well, this is what you get. I need the href tag. The href is a link, right? And inside there, I'm going to say, we don't have this yet, but I'm going to put student details, that's the next page, .aspx. So when I click on the button, it's going to go to my student details page. Okay, good. I'm going to save. And this is nice, but what I really also need is some kind of text for my link, which is going to be something like add student, right? Because I want to have an add student. But I could have put this all in one line, but it's nice to see it like this. Okay. Let's see what it does. So save. I press play, and now what do I have? I should have a little button that says, in my students link, that says add student. Let's take a look and see if I get that, or if somehow I messed up. Yay! Doesn't do anything yet, right? Remember, we talked about read. Now we're going to do the create. When I create a new student, right? I'm going to click add student, and this is going to take me to a new page that doesn't exist right now called studentdetails.aspx. What do I need to do first? Create the page, right? No page, no link, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to say stop. I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, right-click on my project, right? And I'm going to say add and web forms with master page, which I'm going to choose student details. Student details. Well, this would be equivalent to your details page if you're going to do the game details, right? You can see the amount of work that we're talking about here, right? Press OK. Okay, so now that it's going to take me to my student details, right? This page here is what is going to give me the ability to add new students. Okay. Page in here as a stub. It's not going to do anything right at this particular moment in time. We're going to put a title for it called student details. Right? Oops. There we go. Student details. Okay, cool. Let's go back to that student page. So that's the add. We're going to make sure that that student details adds. Let's do a very simple one, though. I want to delete students. I want to be able to delete a student somehow. And I want to be able to do it in a very simple way, right? How do I do that? Well, there's a different kind of field. I created a bound field last week. There's a different kind of field called a command field. All right? Remember, if I type inside the columns tag right here, right, I have only certain options for what I can do. And one of them is called an ASP command field, right? The bound field actually binds data to the database. A command field allows me to perform something, a command. Right? Let's double click. All right, so my command field, my header text, again, if I kind of talk about what my header text is going to be, my header text is going to be what? In my command field. Well, it's going to be delete, right? Something. All right, that's one. And then what I want is my delete text. This is very important. You're going to see what this does. So type in delete text. Delete text is the word that's going to be inside of my delete button, whatever my delete text is going to be. And now there's a reason why I'm doing this, because I want to use font awesome. Otherwise, there's other ways of coding this thing. But here's my delete text that I want to put in. I want to put in, notice it's in brackets, in quotations, right? Because this is the workaround. An I with a class of, notice because I'm putting it in quotations, I got to put single quotes, right? FA dash trash, right? Dash O, which is outlines, that's what it is. And then FA large, a large trash icon that's looking like an icon, like an outline. That's what this is, all right? And I'm just using the font awesome to do it, right? Okay, cool. I want to close off this I tag and actually code it in there like it should be. So this stuff is actually going to be in the delete text. So my delete text of the button is going to have this stuff, right? Okay, so I'm not going to have, I also want to add in the word delete. That would be good too. How about that, right? So that's my delete text. Okay, next. We're not done yet. Yes. Thank you. Otherwise it would totally fail. Single quotes inside the class. So instead of double quotes like we have it up here for the class, CSS class, right? Or even the button that we just made, right? We have to use single quotes because the single quotes, the class is inside double quotes. We can't use double quotes, it won't know what to do, right? Okay, next. What we want to keep typing is the following. I want to show delete button, right, is equal to true. Actually a command we can use because we're going to specify that the command field is the delete button. That's what we're specifying here. Next, okay, my button type. So if I type button and I press Control Space, button type, my button type is equal to there's three kinds. I can choose a button, an image, or a link. I don't need a button because I'm going to use CSS to make this look like a button. By the way, remember, we're talking about old technology, ASP.NET. If I make this a button, guess what this delete text is going to do? It's going to fail, right? So please make it a link because I'm just going to code it to look like a button, just like we did with the stuff up here. This is an actual link, and I'm using CSS to make it look like a button, right? Bootstrap. All right, so where the button type is going to be link. And again, if you don't know, if you want to get the code hinting, Control Space, you can see that it's link, right? And then here's the control style. This is that I want you to show. Control style CSS class. What are you going to put in there? Okay, so it's a little bit different. It's not like the way we did it before. So again, it's button, right? Space button dash danger. So the red button this time instead of the green button, right? And then button dash small, all right? That's it. Now we're going to close it off, and that's it. That's the line. That's the command field. Okay, what does this look like? Has no functionality yet, peoples. All right, please do not think this has any functionality whatsoever. Notice that there is no href for this this type of button. Okay, it's all we're doing here, right? All we're doing here is we're creating the way the thing looks. There is no functionality at this point. Let's try this out because we have to code it on the back end. All right, let's run this thing. So I'm gonna run it with debugging. And what does it look like? Let's see the representation of what I've just done. And this is important if you're going to do this kind of thing in a table. Remember, grid views, like where we're showing right now, are the most common things we can use. Hint, hint, right? Hint, hint. Remember, I made a header text. The header row says delete. Do I need this? Probably not, because I have all this, right? If I click this button, is it going to delete anything right now? No, there's no functionality. It's going to give me this error. It's going to say, whoa, dude, I don't have a row deleting method, which wasn't handled. That's the event. I need to create on row deleting. When I delete the row I'm choosing, I got to go to the database and remove it from the database. That's what I want to do. Okay, just going to put it out there. If I do this row deleting now, one of our unique students is going to be gone, right? Just letting you know, right? As long as you're okay with that, we'll do it one time. If I do it too many times, we're going to have to re-import that database because they're all going to be gone. There's not going to be any more data. Okay. So we got to fix this thing by putting in this on row deleting somewhere. And the place to do that is actually in the grid view itself. So first, we create the button, step 1. 2, modify the actual grid view, right? Which is this part, this tag right here. Notice that it only has this information right now. We're going to add additional things to it, like additional properties. If you want to see what the properties you can add, you can always click on properties, right? Notice these are all the different things you can do, right? Like row deleting. And you can also click on any kind of additional things here, right? So if I go to row header column, all this kind of stuff, you can see that these are all the things that I can set. And some of them say not set. I can set some of these properties. Okay, let's get out of here. And I want to show you more stuff so you can see what I'm saying. An example of this would be I want to create an event, right? Remember, because I'm using auto event wire up in my directive, this is the directive. The page directive tells ASP.NET that I want to auto wire up or create the code for my event automatically when I start typing my event. An example of that would be if I start typing on row deleting. We're going to do another line here just to give us some more room. I'm going to start typing on, control space. It's going to give us all the different kinds of events we can do. The one we want is on row deleting. This is the one we want. As the row is being deleted, right? That's what I want. Okay, good. Now, I open it up and it says, hey, I want to create a new event. What's the event name going to be called? It's going to be called whatever this thing is called. Students grid view underscore on row deleting. That's what it's going to be called. Because of the name of the ID of the grid view. Let's double click and find out. So double click, students grid view, row deleting, and then when I press save, it's going to create that space for me to do that deletion. Let's go back. Notice that there's a little asterisk now on the student.aspx.cs file. If I click there, you can see that there's a space with a sender and an event argument, right, on row deleting, right, which is exactly what we did last semester. If you were with me for last semester, some of you may not have been, with Windows Forms. Same thing. Double click on a control, bam, you get this little thing. Instead of double clicking, we're actually typing in the event type. Why? Because we're not dragging and dropping this semester because it's broken, right? It won't work properly, right? And because we're using Entity Framework. All right, so we got that piece. I want to make it work, right? I want to make it work, which means we need the code behind file to be modified. Okay. And we got to also think about what we're doing here when I do the on-row deleting thing, right? It's very important to understand these things because if I don't, right, if I don't do it properly for you, there's a lot of little things that can go wrong. Okay, first, what do I want to do? I want to store, right? Here's the pseudocode, which row was clicked. I need to know which row was clicked. How do I find out which row was clicked from this event? I want you to remember stuff that we did, right, last semester. For people who did things with me at Windows Forms. We did Windows Forms. We want to find out which row was clicked. How do I find that out? What do you think? Which object is it going to be? Sender or E? Which one? Sender is what I'm clicking, the control that I'm clicking. E tells me where in the control, what event I'm accessing. So where am I going to get it from? E, right? So here's how you do it. If you start typing E just by itself, and if I go E dot, and if I start typing just something like row index, guess what? It's right there. So it gives me the row index in my grid view because it knows it's a grid view. So if I click on E.row index, I can get the index of the row that I'm deleting. Okay, but this isn't enough. I want to kind of store it. I want to be able to kind of create it. So I'm going to create an integer, a local integer. We're going to call this selected row. Here's my selected row. And I'm going to store E dot. Again, this code is going to be available to you. You don't have to try and remember this. I want you to see it so you understand it. Row index. Okay, here's my E.row index. Okay, after I've got that, what I want to do is I want to get the selected student ID, whatever the ID is, right? Using the grid's data key collection. All right. Uh-oh. I haven't set up the data key collection on the grid. What do I need to do? Well, if I go back to my student page, I'll leave student details for now. But the student page itself, notice that I've got in my ASP part in the grid view, I've got some information. I could put additional information, right? And if I start typing data key, right? Data key names, right? What it tells me is, okay, what am I going to use, right, as an example? Which field am I going to look at, to get information about my table? What field am I going to use, right? Anyone have a recommendation for this? So I'm going to look at a particular field, right? And I want you guys to think about this for a second. What field would I look at to get information about the rows in my table? Huh? Who said ID? Student ID is the field, right? Because that's what's going to be in it. If you don't know what it is, and I'll put it, and you have to type it, by the way. There is no code hinting for this because it's data specific. So student ID. So how did I get that? How did I guess that that would be the data key names? Data key names basically tells the data grid view what's my index. What's my what the index is. And if you look at the Solution Explorer, this is all setup, guys. Setup. You don't have to remember this right now. If I look at my models again, and if I look at my student, you can see that, right, I have a bunch of stuff. One of them, the main key, this is the unique key, if you will, that's self-incrementing or auto-incrementing, is the student ID. It's got to be exactly like this. It can't be spelled something else. It can't look at, you're relating back to a table field, right, which is the main key in the table. So that's what we're putting inside data key names. Data key names means what am I looking at? If I hover over data key names, right, it doesn't give me any code hinting. It's not like I can sit there and go like, okay, choose a field. It doesn't look at the field. It doesn't understand what the fields are. It's not that smart. But on the back end, I can say, hey, depending on what the data key collection is, my student ID, I can decide which one I'm going to delete. Okay. So I want to create another variable, which we're going to call student ID, right? It's a local variable. Remember, student ID is a number. In this particular case, sometimes we also have a hash value. Sometimes student ID may not be a number. It might be a string, right? For now, in our particular case, it's a number. And what I want to do typically is do something like this. I want to do students grid view. I want to look at the students grid view, and I want to look at the data keys. Data keys, right? And data keys, Tom. What are the key names? Data keys. And the data keys I want to look at is the selected row, right? Here's my selected row. So I'm saying, hey, take a look at the selected row, which I've just got from the row that I've clicked. This is what I made right here. Take a look at the selected row, okay? Oh, that's really cool. I got your selected row. I want to get the values from the selected row based on the student ID. Okay, now you're not going to remember this, but don't worry about it, all right? Okay, I'm getting an error. Why am I getting an error? Because the value I get back is what kind of value? Back from my data table. String. So if I hover over it, you can see that what I'm returning, right? I'm not casting this, and I need to cast this because I'm expecting an integer, but this is returning something else. So what I can do is I can convert this to integer, right? So ready? So I'm going to convert to int32. So I'm going to say something like this. Convert 32, right? There it is. It's a short int or a regular int, and I want to wrap everything in here. Okay, cool. So without knowing what this does for a second, I'm getting information from my selected row, whatever the number is, right? I'm relating it to a field inside of my table, a row in my actual table, right? And I'm storing it in the student ID that's related to it. So whatever that student ID is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. And if you notice, when I ran the first table, it showed me a list of student IDs on the left-hand side. That's what this represents. Okay. Next, I want to connect to the database, just like we did last time, right? Again, I showed you that we can do it in, so I want to use EF, right, and link, what I'm using, find the selected student, whatever it is, right, in the database and remove it. That's what I want to do. So find it and remove it. How do I do that? I'm using my using statement again. And I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. If you look up here, I already did it up here. Contoso context, DB, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly the same, which means I'm duplicating myself. If I'm repeating myself, I probably could have done this in one line and said that I connected one time. All right? The great thing about the using statements is everything that's contained in the using statement is you connect and disconnect. All right? It doesn't keep the connection open forever. Right? So I'm going to say something like this. Contoso context, there it is. DB is equal to a new contoso context, which is going to be basically going to be a new reference to the database. That's what I'm doing here. And it's going to be another code block right here. So here's my next code block. So inside, now right here, I've connected to the database. That's how easy it is with link. There's no funky open, close, connect. It's open. It's done. I'm connected. Okay, now, once I've connected, I got to do a couple things, right? One, I got to create an object of the student class. That's what I want to do, right? And store the query, my query, my delete query, right? Inside of it. So I want to get a type of the student class. So I want to say something like this. Student, notice how it goes, this teal color. This teal color is a class, right? The class is coming from my models folder, because remember, up on the top, I've included these two using statements, my models folder as well as model binding. And I've told it to look inside the models folder for all of my models, which is the student model, department's model, the courses model, and so on, right? So down here, I'm saying, hey, get a reference to a new student object. Okay, that's what I'm doing. I want to call this student object the deleted student. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to have it. Here's my deleted student. I want to know which student I'm deleting. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, now, next. Here's the link piece. Okay, so this using statement is using entity framework. This is link right here. Let's remember how it looks like. It looks like SQL query language, right? From. And we're going to say student records. We're going to make this up. Student records. That's the object in db.students. So whatever my student record is. I want to where my student records dot student ID, right, is equal to student ID, right? My student record, whatever the student records are, one or more, and I only want to use something called first or default. Okay, I'll explain this in a second. First or default, we're converting what we're going to get back from the query if we don't find something. Example, somehow we clicked on something, and let's say Eddie and I are accessing, I'm just using Eddie's name for a second. Eddie and I are accessing the same data table. He deletes it, and then I try and delete it before the database is updated. It could happen, by the way. It's going to return null, right? And I don't want my database to crash if we're both trying to delete the same student record. This prevents that, right? By the way, you could put a try catch around the using statement. If you can't connect somehow to the database, prevents you, right? I'm not doing that right now. I will later on. I could put a try catch. If you have a problem deleting, could throw an exception. A lot of stuff. Anytime you have a connection to any kind of data store, you want to put it inside of a try catch, right? And return what the problem was, right? For now, though, we're going to assume that everything is beautiful, right? And there's no errors whatsoever, ever in our code, right? Which is totally not true, right? Okay, so we did this one piece, and we're still inside this special using statement. Let's complete this. We're going to remove the selected student now, so right from the database. What's the next piece, right? Okay, I'm going to say db.student, right? Remember, students is the students table inside the database. That's what I'm referring to. DB we created by doing this. When we opened up the connection to the database, we have access to all the tables that are created in that connection. Students is one of the tables. So I'm going to say, hey, look at this students table. And what are we going to do? Because the students table is using link, and it's a list. What's the list command to remove something from the data from a list? What do I use? What's the command? Remove. Here it is, remove. So remove from the students table. That's how easy it is. Remove from the students table what? This, the deleted student that I found, right? Deleted student. Done. I've removed my student. Okay, not quite done. And we have one more couple of operations. I want to save my changes. I'm telling the database what to do back to the database, right? So the way to do that is to db save changes. Okay, and also after I've deleted the student, does the grid change? It's a static grid. I haven't done anything unless I refresh it. And the way to do that, of course, is do something like want to refresh the grid, right? And I want to say something like this dot students, right? Because get students, remember, reads from the database table and fills up the grid. That's what this thing does, right? So I'm going to delete it, and then afterwards, I'm going to refresh the grid and show that the student's gone. Okay? That's delete. So we've done read and delete. We got to test it because I'm nervous. I'm going to lose data. I'm going to lose data, right? Okay, here's something else. What if we want to make some dummy data right now, and I want to do it in my SQL Server Object Explorer? Can I do it? The answer is yes. This is how you do it. I go into my local database. I want to show you how to do it. You can see it. I'm going to go into COMP229. Inside the table I want to modify, which is DB students, this is doing it directly, right? Right-click, right? And then what I want to do is view data. What this is going to do is show me all the data physically in the database. This is a great way to do it. I want to add in the temporary data. Wow, what last name am I going to add in? Me, right? Here, I'm going to delete myself this way. I need first and middle name and some kind of enrollment date. Well, it's probably going to be 2016, 0901, like September 1st, 2016. I don't know, that's not right, but let's press tab. Notice when I press tab, I got a new student number, 301001, right? Added a new student, that's me, right? And did it work? How do we test that? Run it. That's how. Let's run this. Let's run the bloody thing and see what's going to happen. First of all, it's going to build what I just did, right? And that's going to show my data. I've added data to my database. I'm showing you how to play with the data, guys, too, because when you create your data for your game, you're going to have to do it somewhat live, right? Hey, where's me? I'm at the bottom somewhere, and oh man, I'm hidden. How come I'm hidden? Because of the way I did my. First of all, let's go back to this. I'll show you some of this, right? Because of the way I've done my my CSS, I need to push this up a little bit more, right? And also, I'm not scrolling. This thing's on top of everything else, right? This thing here, it's a fixed footer, right? That's on the bottom, and this is going underneath it, right? Well, you can see that I'm here, right? Okay, let's do one more. Let's just reduce this one more time so you can see it all. There we go. All right. So here's me. I want to delete it. This is the test. If I click delete, everything goes well. Bye-bye, Tom. Right? Delete. Let's check and see what happened on the database. Did it really go away? What if I refresh? Is that data persistent now? Like, is it gone for good? Right? Or is it still back? Right? Uh-oh. What happened? Why did it give me this error? Right? It's trying to delete me again. I'm resubmitting my click. I don't want that to happen ever, right? I only want it to happen once, right? That's a problem if I try and do this. So that's why I need this try catch, right? Try catch, otherwise, you know, whatever, and make sure it doesn't do a post back. I don't want a post back to do this remove ever. So if not post back, right, it's got to be wrapped around my whole thing. That's what a post back is, what I just did. I posted back, resubmitted, and I don't want that. It only has been one time. Okay, let's try this again. So I want to wrap, I want to do the event, but I want to wrap the event in something that is something like this. If not is post back. If it's not a post back, I'm not resubmitting, then what do I want to do? I want to wrap my event. I'm going to Control X here, go to the bottom, right? Underneath this using statement, right? And below where everything else goes, I want to kind of put this in there. I want to Control A and right click, and I want to format my selection a little bit, right? Now remember that one thing, the way you can do it is you can actually do refactor for reformat, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to go into, actually did it automatically for me. Okay, so cool. So I've got this not is post back. Let's add that data back in. So I'm going to go back to this data, right? Notice that it's the old stuff. I haven't refreshed it. If I refresh this table, right, that Tom's gone, right? Let's put him back. So, you know what? It's too long to type my name. Let's put Smith, Tom Smith, right? 2016, 09, 01. Too long. Tom Smith, right? I'm a Canadian. All right, let's go into type it in, see what happens. Okay, good. Let's run this thing again. So I had a problem. It stopped. I want to resubmit, right? And I want to try that resubmission and see if it fails again, because that's a post back. right? I don't want my postbacks to work because that means by accident, like I did, the user presses refresh. I'm just going to try and delete the same one again. Here's Tom Smith. Let's delete him. Boop. Should work like last time, right? Uh-oh. Boop. Uh-oh. Boop. Not postback is preventing that from happening too, right? So I got a bit of a problem, right? How do I prevent that from happening? This not postback, not is postback, this link here that I put in. So if I go back to ASP, this one, not is postback, is preventing me. It's detecting me that I'm doing something in the same page. It's posting back. What I really want to say here, I want to make sure that you can't, after it's been deleted, I can't click that button anymore. It doesn't exist, right? I could refresh the page. I'm not refreshing the page. With my get student, look, this line here that I want to show you, the line that I put in that refreshes my students does not refresh the page. This does not refresh the page. What does it really do? It fills in the data in my database. That's what, or in the grid view. It just takes that grid and put it back. I'm not refreshing the page, right? So that's what's causing the problem. Now, it's posting back. When I refresh the page, it creates a post back. So I need to find a way of doing this. We won't do it today. But I want to find a way of doing this, checking to see if I'm coming back to the same page because of a refresh. Okay? So if a student does a refresh the page, as opposed to, that's why I left it like this, as opposed to the other way around. So I can delete, but I know I have an issue, and I'm going to get back and correct that later. I can't do it yet. All right. Just looking at the time, I'm going to make sure how much time we have to do the ad, right? I can do it. I know, but I want to make sure that I don't want to cause. So deleting is happening in this page. I can delete in the page, but when I do want to edit, I don't want to edit in this page. I want to edit, and I want to add all on the student details page. That's what I want to do. So I want to update, right? My update and my creation is going to happen on a different page, my student details page. Why? Now in your case, because of the game tracker, right? There's two ways of doing this. If you do a details page, and by the way, I'm giving you the way of getting extra marks. I told you it's extra work. I need to make another page. I need to code the page on the actual HTML outside, plus on the back end. Those two things have to be done. And I got to create a form in order for me to do this. It's not a simple, oh yeah, it's just done. I made a page, and nothing's automatic. It's all something that I got to do by myself, right? Okay, are you ready? If we can get this done, it's going to be a big journey, but we'll try. All right. First of all, it's like we're going to close this down. We'll come back to it in a second. I'm going to close this down because this page is done. So let's go back to the student details page. Okay, first, whoa. Tom, you're doing too much. Let's go into my changes on my GitHub. These are all the changes I added. I added a student details page, and I updated my student page to include a delete. So I'll say something like added delete function to student grid, students list, right? That's what it is. Commit all, home, and sync, and push. Here we go. So that whole code is up on GitHub for you, right? So if you couldn't follow along, or if I did it too quickly, you have it. And on a test, if I ask you to do CRUD, create, read, update, delete, you're going to have access to my code up on GitHub. It's not going to be an issue. You're going to have to modify it to make it work with the application I'm going to ask you to do. It's not going to be a strict copy and paste, but you'll be able to access it and look at it. You won't have to try and figure it out. Why? Because in the real world, if I'm going to look at doing a CRUD operation, I have like reference to a ton of examples up online. That's reality. I'm not going to copy everything word for word, but I'm going to take the example in my mind and understand what's happening. I'm doing this with you so you understand the process, not because I expect you to remember everything yet. Second half of semester, that's a different story, right? Because we're still going to be using Entity Framework, but we're going to be using it all semester, right? We just touched Entity Framework right now. I can't expect for you to understand Link and Entity Framework in a couple weeks. It's too much, but I want you to understand the process. That's why we're doing it this way. All right, let's do a couple things here. First, I want to add a container to my page, right? Back to what we did. So here's my student details page. I'm going to go to my student details page, which I made, which is empty. inside my content page, right? I want to add a div tag with a class of container, right? I want to have a div tag with a class of row. Inside that, I want to have a div tag with a class of column dash medium dash offset dash 3, let's say, right? And column dash medium dash 6. So 6 columns in the middle, 3 columns on each side. It's going to be a little bit narrower because we're doing an add and remove page, add and update page, right? So it's all going to be a little form that can add new users, like the name, first name, last name, and that's it. And then click add, right? That's all this is going to do. Tab. Okay, it's going to get all this information in there. All I've done is I'm using Zen coding to get this again to start up my page structure. Next, I want to start by talking about an H1 tag that says something like student details, right? Here's my student details. How we're starting to code, right? This is just the HTML piece first. Next, I also want to say, indicate to the user that something like, all fields are required, right? So we don't have to do some kind of required field thing. I want to add a line break between these two things, and I could add CSS, but let's just for now add a BR, right? Line break. Now, this is where it gets a little hairy. And what I want to do is I want to include a form group with a label and a text box, right? For each of the fields, I'm making a form, just like we did with a contact form. It's going to be the same thing here, right? So I want to say a div with a class of form group, right? I'm going to copy this a couple times. Here's my div of the class of form group. And the first one is going to be a label, right? Here's my label. So this is an HTML label with a class of control label. That's what it's going to be if I can type that properly, yeah. And my class of control label. I also want to make a for, and I want to start off with last name text box. That's what it's going to be. That's what the for is going to be. That's that piece. It's going to reference the text box that I don't have yet. Inside my label itself, it's going to be called last name, right? The last name label. That's really what it is, right? I don't have an ID for this. Notice I don't have a ID is equal to last name label. I don't have that, and I don't need it. I also want to create, this is the new one, ASP, right? Text box. Now I could have dragged and dropped it, right? But I need this, and the text box is just an input from an HTML perspective. That's all it is. Remember, I want to definitely run at the server, right? Because if I don't run at the server, I won't be able to get my server to process this little control, right? I want to use a CSS class. Remember, we're using Bootstrap of form-control. So it's going to look like a form control, right? I need to make an ID, capital I, capital D, not the lowercase ID that we use in HTML, to call it last name text box. Maybe I should probably redo this one so it says last name text box properly, Tom. How about that? Talking to myself again. It's all your fault, right? And then we can add some other additional details. For example, I'm going to put a new line here. I can keep going with one line. Our placeholder, right? We can do a placeholder, which we can have inside their last name if you want. And we can also say required, right, is equal to true, right? And then we can close off the first tag and the second tag. And that, my friends, is the way we do a control with a label and some kind of text box. Now you've done this already with your contact form. It's the same. So if I want last name and first name for my student, right? I need 3 pieces of data actually. I need last name, first name, and enrollment date. Enrollment date's kind of tricky, right? Because enrollment date has to have a certain format. Let's try this out. So I want to grab all this and copy it and give kind of a space just from a visual, formatting perspective, not because I need to. And it's not going to affect my HTML in any way. Press Control V for space or for paste. Now the last name text box is not going to be the same label. It's not going to say last name. It's going to say first name. Right? And it's going to say first name text box. That's the for. And might as well use this one to change the ID, first name text box. This thing is going to say in my placeholder first name. There we go. So I've got that piece. That's my 2 label and inputs. Basically boxes to input data, right? Okay, let's do the next one. Now this is going to be the tricky one. This is going to be the enrollment date. We'll put this in here. So it's very similar to this, right? But it's slightly different. So 4, again, this one is going to be the enrollment date text box, right? So we're going to type it all out. Enrollment date text box, right? And we're going to say in here enrollment date, whatever the enrollment date of the student is. Remember, I typed in even on the database, September 1st, 2016 as an example, right? I want there to be a little bit more data validation here. We're going to talk about validation controls a little bit next week as well. Okay. Now, it's still going to be a type of text box. I need a different kind of ID though, okay? Right now, these text boxes are regular inputs, right? And this can't be this. It's got to be enrollment date. So copy, paste. There we go. And this is going to be enrollment date here. This is all required, right? So enrollment date. Okay, good. We need one more piece of information. We want text mode. Text mode is equal to date. Okay. I put in date as text mode. Every browser handles it slightly differently. Okay. Chrome will actually pull up a little date box, right? But it won't work properly in IE. It actually looks pretty darn ugly. So it's kind of browser specific. And it completely fails in Firefox, right? No, I was putting it out there. That's just an HTML thing, right? So we have to, sometimes what we do is in real life, we code this with JavaScript a little bit and create a JavaScript date. We're not going to do that here. We're going to assume that everyone's using Chrome, right? Because everyone loves Chrome, right? Why? Because it's going to be really tough for us to do this kind of thing, right? With the time that we have. That's the one thing I want to, to show you. And we're going to do our validation controls later on. Okay. So that's our date. Inside this little div tag, I also want to put a div with a class of text write. So we're going to write justify what we're going to put it inside here. That's what this text write does, right? I want to put an ASP button. So you can type it like this, ASP button. There we go. Inside my ASP button, I want to have my text of the button. This is the property is going to be cancel. And my ID is going to be called what? A cancel button. You guys have done any kind of Windows form stuff, this should be very familiar to you, right? So cancel button. My CSS class, of course, is going to make it look like a button, right? Which is going to be button, and then my button is going to be a button warning, right? So cancel and button large. There we go. CSS class. And then, of course, we're going to run it the server because we want to definitely do that. Yay, we got a button. Okay. Now, here's something we need to do because we want our cancel button not to submit the form. This is very key, actually. Okay. If we submit the form, it'll try and do the addition, which is not what I want. I want to not do that. I want to not submit. And the way to do that is we say use submit behavior, right? Use submit behavior is equal to false. So it's not going to submit the form, right? We want to turn that behavior off. And we also want to say causes validation, just in case we have validation controls later on, is also false. The cancel button doesn't cause any validation. It's just going to cancel, right? And here's something else we want to do. We want an on-click event to do something with the button, right? And if I do that, I want to create a new event. What's the event going to be called? What's the event going to be called? It's going to auto-generate it. Okay, I'm going to ask some other smart people in a second. What's the event going to be called? What's the event going to be called? Huh? Oh, did you do it? You just did it, right? Okay. Cancel button click, right? It's automatic. It takes the name of the ID and adds click onto the end. Come on, right? This is easy. And then if you look at the student details, right, you see this little space here that says cancel button click automatically generated for us. We need this to do something. If we don't have that, not going to do nothing, right? Next, okay, we have our cancel button. And we also have to kind of create our save button, some kind of save button. So when we update, depending on what we're doing, if we're updating or whether we're creating a new item, like a new one, or we're editing an old one, we want a save button. All right? So that's the other button we're going to click, and it's going to be inside this text right justified area. So we're going to say another ASP button with the text instead of cancel, it's going to be save. I'm going to do it like this so you can see it again, right? If I ever ask you to do a button, I need to do a CSS class of button, right? But this time my button, I'm going to use button primary, the blue button. That's what it's going to be, button large. Right, there we go. I'm not using any, by the way, I'm not using any font awesome stuff in this particular case. I could totally do that though. Run at is equal to server, right? And then what do I want to do? Notice I'm not putting in the other behavior, but I want to put in on click, right? Is equal to create new event. Save button click. Yay. Done. Okay, I got my save button. I got my cancel, my edit button. Let's see if it actually goes to this bloody page, right? Or if I'm totally wrong. So I can't test it, right, unless I go to the first page. And if I try in here, I mean, it'll take me to my student details page, but I won't do anything. Let's try it out. So let's look and see what the student details page will look like, all right, which is kind of important. So I'm here. I'm not in my students yet. I'm in my student details page. I'm going to get a nav bar too. My nav bar is going to show my regular nav bar, and this is what I get. This is my student details page. All fields are required. So I want to do Lattiman. If I click this, notice that in Chrome, I get this little box. It saves me the trouble of getting my formatting correct. But I have to warn you that my Chrome, with my culture settings, might be totally different than your Chrome and your culture settings, which means you're going to do some data validation in here. Not right now, but we'll have to handle that next week. All right? Well, for now, when I enter a new student, I can put the student details in here, click Save, and we've added a new student. Or if I read, it's going to fill in the student details. I can modify it, click Save, and it's going to modify the student. Those are the two things we're going to do. That's why I'm using one form. One bird killed two stone, or one stone killed two birds. Two birds killed one stone. There we go. How about that? In my tired state, I could say anything. All right, let's stop. Okay, so we've got the form. It looks okay. I think it's a great place for us to do some coding. Now, right? Right? No, I'm going to do it with you so you can see it, so you can see the process. The process is very important. It's not the code. The code you can get from online anywhere you want, right? It's the process I want you to understand. Okay. Let's do the cancel button click first. That's the easiest one to take care of. How do I cancel button? Well, this is really great. I can do something like this. I want to redirect, right, back to the students page. How do I do that? It's very simple. Response. Remember, request response. So response dot redirect. And where is it going to go? And again, I want to use the tilde to say absolutely. The absolute path is students.aspx. When I click on the students button, it's going to redirect back to the students page. That's all it's going to do. It's not going to post anything to the page. It's not going to delete anything or add anything. It's going to go back. Let's check that out and see if it works. I'm going to go back to this page, press play, right? And if I click on cancel, it's going to take me back to the students page, right? Let's see if that works. Again, I'm testing as I go to show you. I don't want it, not because I want to waste time. Click cancel and then back to the students page. We're supposed to take me. Like student details, it's going to take me back to the students page. I should get this. If I click add student now, it's going to take me back to here. I got that functionality linked, right? Go back. It's going to take me back to here, right? This is good. It's a good thing, right? Now what I want to do is click save and make that do something. Now here's the challenge. Here's where all the money. This is the money that we're gonna be working for right now. If you're working in a company, this is where you get paid the big bucks, right? To do this kind of stuff. I'm joking. No big bucks. I'm going to do one of these. I want to say, well, God, I want to do something that I've never done before. I want to use EF, right? Use EF to connect to, God, you're going to see some stuff to the server. What do I do there? Well, I need to use the using statement, right? And I need to access my default connection, which is called Contoso context, which means up here, I need to have a reference to the models folder. So I have a using, so in order for me to use EF, In order for me to use EF, let's delete that. I need using statements, right, required for entity framework database access. What are they? If I was gonna put a quiz together next week, you should know these already. I've done them a bunch of times. Using, starts with using, right? COMP229, right? Got what? Models, it's even there, right? So if I go models, if I don't have access to my models folder, I don't have the classes, I don't have student, departments, I don't have all those things. My models folder is a reflection of the database tables. That's what they are, right? Next, I also need to use the system.web.model binding using statement, so I can bind, to the actual, my controls can bind to the database. Okay, now that I've got that, I want to connect to the database, and guess what I'm going to use? A using statement, right? So using, what is it going to be? Contoso context db is equal to new. You should have this by heart now. Contoso context, right? And you can see that this is nothing new. So I've connected to the database. Yay! Want to make a connection to the database. I want to something that we've done already, use the student model, right, to create, right, a new student object. That's what I want to do. And, right, I want to save a new record. I want to do. Those are the two things I want to do here. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to do something like this. Student. Right? We called the other one deleted student. This one's a new student. Ooh. Is equal to a new student. This is a little different than we've seen before. So I'm actually creating a new student object. So I've got a new student object that's empty. Student object has student ID, first mid-name, sorry, last name, and enrollment date. Those are the things that all student objects have. It's called new student, right? I need to, I want to make sure I don't mess up, because there's a bunch of stuff I could do that I don't need to do right now, but I'll have to do later, right? So I want to do the following. I want to say something like this. I want to say my student ID, right? My initial student ID is 0. Okay. You see why in a second. If request, here's the thing that I want to do. Request got query string got count, and I'll explain this in a second, is greater than 0, right? Means something like our URL has a student ID in it. Right? If our URL has a student ID in it. And how would we get why would our URL have a student ID in it? Because I'm doing instead of an add, I'm doing an update, right? If my URL has a student ID in it, then what do I really want to do, right? I want to, if it's true that I have this in, let me put this back over here, sorry. I may not right now. Right now, all I'm doing is I may not have a student ID, right? My URL string, okay, it's not what I wanted. I wanted to put this here. My student ID may not have, I may not have a student ID in it, right, whatsoever. But if I do, I want to get the ID from the URL. I don't have that right now, all right? If I have it. Okay? I'm not going to put that functionality in right now because I don't have any way of getting my student ID from the URL, right? However, if I don't, else, I don't have to put else, I can add form data, whatever the form data, to the new student record. I'm going to put this in as a placeholder. So just in case I want to check to see if I'm going to do an update, then my URL would have a student ID in it, right? I'm not doing that though. Okay, next. So I want to add form data to the thing. So how do I do that? I say new student, right? Dot last name. This is really simple. Is equal to my last name text box dot text. Remember, it's not going to submit until all the fields, because I've made them all required. It won't get here unless they're filled up with something. Okay, and then I'm going to say new student dot first mid name is equal to first name text box dot text. Ooh, this is like really interesting. And then my new student, right, dot enrollment date, well, this is tricky, is equal to, I want to convert dot to date time. You have to do it that way because it's a time, it's a date, which is my enrollment date, text box dot text. I'm converting because if I don't convert, then I'm going to get some weird number, right? I want to convert back to a date because that's how it's going to be stored in the database. Otherwise, I mean, the database doesn't store strings. In this particular case, it stores a date, right? So be careful what kind of data you're going to have in the database. Otherwise, it'll mess up. All right. I want to use link, right, to ado.net, that kind of thing. That's what we're doing, to add, and I'm going to say, or insert, if you will, new student into the database. That's what I'm doing here. That's the next thing I wanted. So first, I created the student, and I read the data from the form. That's what I'm doing here. Okay. Okay. Here's where I check to see if my student ID is 0. Why? Because in here, I would set the student ID to something else, right? But I don't have a student ID, so it's going to be 0, right? So if my student ID is exactly equal to 0, then I know that I don't have a pre-existing student. It's a new student, right? I'm going to do something like this: db.students.add whatever my new student is. Because otherwise, in here, I haven't added it in. But in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say, hey, make the student ID equal to the student ID that I'm getting from the data table, right? I haven't done that. I haven't coded that yet. All I'm doing is going to add the student in. So this is what this does. Okay, once I've done that, all I need to do is save our changes. And this also, by the way, updates and inserts. Once I do with the following code, which is, we've already seen this before, db.savechanges. db.savechanges doesn't just update the database, it actually performs the update, right? So we need this db.savechanges after we do the add, but we also need db.savechanges when we do an update. Okay? Next. What do I want to do when I'm done adding? I want to redirect back to the updated students page, right? Because I've just added a student. So how to do that? Response.redirect, right? And I'm going to go back to the absolute position of my students.aspx page. Oof. That's the add. So we've got delete. I'll show you the add in a second. We don't have an update, not yet. Why? We need another button. We don't have an edit button yet. We can add that in later, right? Our field needs 2. There's a delete button, and we need an edit button. And the edit button will send off the information from the table, from the data grid view, to this little page, the student details page, to allow me to do the rest. Let's try this out and see what happens. First of all, we can start from here, but it's not going to do anything. So if I go plus, oh yeah. Using statement. I probably added another one in there. It doesn't. Oh, maybe I have an extra one. I don't know. Let's see what it is. Maybe you're right. There we go. I didn't close the using. Yay! Thank you. Let's try that again. It would have stopped me anyway, right? Okay. In my diluted head right now, it's like my one eye is blinking because I'm so tired. All right. All right, cool. So let's go back to students, right? So I want to go back here. I want to use my nav to go back. By the way, my navigation is kind of messed up too, right? Because I don't have a student's thing. So I'm going to click Add Student. I've got Tom Smith in there. Let's add another one. Let's add Mary Smith in there too, right? So just because. Last name Smith, first name Mary. Enrollment date. Let's pick an enrollment date. We'll make it Instead of September 1st, we'll make it today's date, right? Notice the format. Save. If everything went well, Mary Smith. So now we've added another one to the database. Let's check to make sure that I'm not delirious, that somehow it worked, right? How do we check? I use SQL Server Object Explorer to check to see that the data has been added to the database, all right? So if I was to go to my table, my student table, and I go view data, right, you can see now that I have Mary Smith, here's the date, and Tom Smith, right? It's both Mary Smith and Tom Smith are there. This is why I do it. And I recommend this. I recommend you try and do the operation, check your data right away. Does it work? Because if it didn't, maybe the table did something weird, but the data didn't persist, right? So we kind of run out of time, but I've got one more operation to do next week, and then we'll get right into security, which is we need to do our update, right? And it's just additional code onto what we've added in already. I'm going to modify the data grid view, and I'm going to add in sorting and paging, right? So maybe I have a big list of data, and I don't want to have this big list. I want to go from one page to the other. We can do that with additional controls we can add into the data grid view. Now remember, I'm focusing on data grid view. So guarantee the data grid view itself, because we've talked about a couple weeks, it's going to be on the test, on the exam. I'm going to get you to make a data grid view. I'm going to give you details on how to do it. I'm going to say add a data grid view, do this, add an edit button, add a delete button, add this, because you're going to have to do the same things that I'm doing here. Let's run this thing and delete. Here's a problem too. I'm going to ask my friends here, right? Rudvik, yeah, hi. Are you alive? Right. If I go back to students, right? And if I'm able to do, I want you to tell me from a design perspective, is this okay? What do you think? Is that okay from a design perspective for me to be able to do that? Should I ask, are you sure, right? I mean, damn, I can delete this whole table if I want, right? And nothing's going to stop me. What if I made a mistake? What if I pressed the wrong button? What if I pressed enter or something weird and it just went there by accident? We need to have some checks. So that's another thing that's missing from our little data grid view. We don't have any kind of validation here whatsoever, right? We need to cover this. So lots of stuff to cover next week. We're also going to cover security, right? Security, by the way, you may think is really hard, but actually it's quite simple, right? Because it's built in, right? To make this thing work. Any questions around today? So today we did a couple things, just to recap, right? I know we did a kind of a longer recording, right? But remember, we did a couple things. One, we did an adding and deleting. Okay, we talked about that. We also did, moving from one grid view to another form, right? And remember, we talked about a lot of different things when it came to administration. So remember, your first part one of your project is due on Friday, right? Please, it's this submission we did today was for the lab. It's for me going to check or X. That's what it's for. It has nothing to do with the submission on Friday, right? Friday is when you do your final submission for your concept, which is part one. Remember that for part one, you could submit a different GitHub link, like my project name -part1.git, right? And then you could do the same thing for part two and part three, right? Any questions before we depart for today? Guys, thank you so much. See you next week. Remember, next week we do security. Thank you.